Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, no matter where you are in the world. My name is Annie, and I'm a co-founder and principal of Penknife Collective. And today I'm excited to chat with you about one of my favorite and arguably a hot topic in our space, which I describe as the art and science of brand and growth. Without giving too much away, I'll share that the sweet spot is based on so many variables, which we'll cover, and one of them being your company stage. So let's dive in. To start, I'll give a good quick intro. As I mentioned, I'm currently the co-founder and principal of Penknife Collective. We're essentially a tight-knit go-to-market crew of builders who work together in the early days of Pinterest. And so we've definitely been in the foxhole together. Because go-to-market is defined and executed differently at every organization, we're here essentially to help startups and companies with go-to-market plans flexibly and quickly, which also means that companies can work with just one of us or some of us. I also work with a handful of startups and organizations as an advisor, including USA Facts. We make government data accessible, Twill, where you can earn money for referring people for jobs, Anise Health, a culturally responsive mental health platform, Zena, which is the fastest and easiest way to get paid in the UAE, and Atmosfy, which helps you explore dining experiences through video. And previous to this, I've worked for nearly 20 years as a marketer across several different startups and big companies that are listed here. And I've learned so much throughout my time at these organizations, which means I'm not a stranger to the natural tensions between brand and growth and all the different marketing disciplines in between. And if you ever face these tensions yourself, you're not alone, and hopefully today's talk will provide some tools that you can work with. So today's agenda. For our talk, I've broken down our agenda into 3 different topics. First, I'll call this the balancing act. And we're all familiar with this concept, so I'll just give a quick context on what the balance is and why I think the tension happens. Then I'll share the top 3 common questions to avoid when looking at this balance. I've compiled this list based on my own experience and also based on what I've observed from my peers and founders that I've worked with. And finally, we'll get to the juicy stuff, how to put it all into practice. I'll share my best practices and concrete frameworks so that you can take back to your teams to start working on this balance today. And hopefully this advice will help you decide where to invest your resources and focus as your team needs ebbs and flows. With that, let's get into it. So we all know innately that too much of anything is never a good thing. And we know that when you spend too much energy in one area, you'll either plateau or become weak and rusty in the other. We also know that the key is finding the best of both worlds and allow variables to complement each other. So I'll share just a few examples. And this first reference is, my personal first reference of getting put in a box. And it's something that I've already noticed in my 5-year-olds. At an early age, one of our first experiences of doing the balancing act was in school. You're either naturally really great at solving problems in different ways and get to the same answer, or as my daughter often asks, why? Some of us were naturally stronger in literacy or our ability to communicate why something works or solved a problem in a certain way. And my next reference is one that we're also probably familiar with, but if we're being realistic, we still struggle with. As adults, we become more cognizant about our health, and we know that doing cardio burns fat and lifting weights builds muscle. And we also know that you can optimize your health when you design a workout schedule that combines both of these activities with good nutrition. But if we're being honest, and I'm going to keep myself honest, it's hard to put this in action. And my final example reference is our current day-to-day. At work, we collaborate with 2 types of people, but the ones who can exercise both their left and right brain are the ones that I tend to admire most. As an example, the best data analysts are also great storytellers, or when brilliant engineers become product leaders because they not only understand how to solve technical problems, but they can communicate information in a way that right brain teams can get on board. And the best storytellers know how to use data to inform their content. Or when talented creatives become leaders because they not only understand how to tell a story, but they can design the right channel mix in a way left brain teams can buy into the results. I've also learned recently a lot in my current role as an advisor at USA Facts about the importance of being nonpartisan and seeking information in a very polarized society. When you seek information, you become more aware, which allows you to advocate a stronger point of view. And I'll plug one of my friends, Monica Guzman, who recently launched a book called I Never Thought About It That Way. And I'll wrap this section with one of her quotes. The problem isn't the partial answers we're always collecting from a variety of sources in our busy lives. It's the questions we stop asking because we think that we've learned enough. So the idea of having a balanced point of view is widely adopted, but why has it become such a contentious topic? My hypothesis is that it's because of our own biases. Research suggests that there are more than 175 different types of cognitive bias. And it comes up so frequently in my conversations with founders and marketers and colleagues that I often joke that the brand versus growth debate has now become a rite of passage at every startup. And I'll share just a few biases that I think are related to this topic in particular. The first is affinity bias. It's our natural favor, it's natural to favor topics that represent who you are, and it can be an unconscious preference of people who share the same experience or are similar to you. The second is authority bias. It's our tendency to place more weight on the opinion from an authority figure, because often I hear because the board told them to, or an expert wrote a blog post or gave a talk on a topic. And third is the recency bias, which is let's just do this because it's what's trending or because it's the best practice of the moment. But I think companies should really ask themselves, does it make sense for your brand and product? And there's so many other biases that get in our own way, but these are just a few. And that leads me to sharing the top 3 common questions or mistakes that founders and marketing leaders make when attempting the balancing act. And I'll share the questions and mistakes first, and then we'll cover the solutions in the next section. So the first top common question, should we spend more resources on brand or performance marketing? Feel free to raise your hand or give a little emote in chat if you feel like you've heard this question before. One answer I hear often is you need to spend it on performance marketing because it's measurable, duh. Or another common answer I hear is spend it on brand because we have an awareness problem and brand spend will solve all the problems. My point of view is that it is possible to optimize for both, but it depends. And we'll cover those factors later. And I'll give a couple more examples that show how people react to one-sided answers. And we'll circle back to this main question. The second common question is, do we drive more acquisition or focus on retaining the customers we have? This is another common debate, and feel free to write in chat if you've heard this question before. And here are the misleading points of views I often hear. One is, we need more signups to boost that monthly active user metric for fundraising. Or we need better activation or retention rates because we need to drive more revenue or higher LTV. The questions I would be asking is, when you look at your customer funnel, are you top or bottom heavy? Is your activation rate already healthy to warrant more traffic? Or do you have a leaky bucket problem before spending time acquiring more users? These are all dependable questions, lots of variables. And finally, the existential question, should we hire a head of marketing or a CMO? Should we stay lean with marketing athletes and generalists, or do we begin specializing because there are so many different types of marketing functions? Again, if you've been a hiring manager or on a team who debated this question, you know that you're not alone. And the common misleading answers that no longer surprise me is we need to hire a unicorn marketer because they'll have the answers to everything. Companies will spend up to 6 months looking for this person, and it will take this unicorn 3 to 6 months until they can either make an impact or realize that the role was too premature for what was needed. Or sometimes on the flip side, companies wait way too long before investing the proper level of marketing resources that they get in their own way of driving growth. Now, with all of that context, we can get into some frameworks that are foundational. And I believe that foundational marketing is so important because it's like setting a strong foundation before you build your house with a blueprint that foresees all the things that can potentially go wrong, but at least you can be prepared in advance. And to me, these are absolute must-haves before even thinking about brand and growth marketing. The first is ensuring that you have metrics that matter. I prefer to look at metrics based on a customer funnel to understand whether your business is tangibly growing or not. It seems pretty straightforward. And that's true because it's tried and true. And while you don't have to recreate the wheel from a funnel perspective, you will want to identify which metrics matter for your business in each step of the funnel. Generally speaking, the earlier stage you are, you can just stick to a few metrics to measure growth. How many impressions you're getting, down to how many people are coming to your site or downloading your app, and then are they activating and coming back after at least 30 days. And then when you have traction, or are in later stage, or you have higher market concentration, then you can get really fancy and expand what you track because you will have enough data to calculate things to like 90-day retention or average revenue per user or LTV. And of course, if you're spending money, it's incredibly important to track if your dollars are being spent wisely. We talked about the funnel metrics, which represent the quantitative data and tells you whether your business is tangibly growing. And then there's brand metrics, which give you context so that you can comprehend the growth metrics with deeper reasoning. And it's intended to be a funnel agnostic metric, in my opinion. It's qualitative data that tells you whether your reputation is growing, is it good or bad, and why. So for example, NPS is a standard metric. It stands for Net Promoter Score that will tell you the likelihood of someone promoting your brand, and you can compare it with baselines in your industry. Aided and unaided awareness will tell you if someone has heard of your brand and whether they came across your brand or not. And user sentiment gives you a lot more detail behind why the customers or users aren't coming back or referring people. So you get a lot more meaty context. And once you've identified the right business metrics, the next framework is how often should you be reviewing those metrics? When should you be discussing resource trade-offs between brand versus growth? And how frequently should you consider pivoting these big decisions? I believe that companies of all stages should be looking at their metrics weekly. It might be too frequent for some, but it's worked for me really well in the past. Maybe you won't be making big resource decisions based on weekly metrics, but you'll know what levers drove the business up or down in a given time. And most importantly, it allows you to react to any negative swings before it does more damage. It's also a good cadence to review what's upcoming in the next sprint cycle or the marketing calendar so that you can be prepared. A monthly view allows you to gather learnings that lead to decisions for the following month. For example, let's say you have no problem driving traffic, but conversion is low, and people aren't not downloading your app or signing up. And in this scenario, you might put more effort into fixing the middle of your funnel while maintaining the top of your funnel. And if you find that conversion is broken, you might even need to take measure to turn off traffic if you need to. And conversely, you might have great activation and retention, but your traffic isn't growing, then you might put more effort into driving traffic in the next one. I'm very curious if people do these weekly and monthly metric mechanisms in your company. Feel free to throw it into chat while I continue. And then there's the quarterly view of metrics for most companies, or an annual view of metrics for larger companies, which shows the bigger picture on whether your entire business is moving in the right direction. This is the cadence where you'd have the bigger budget discussions or hiring needs, and you might even discuss whether the business warrants a strategic pivot. So it sounds like people have weekly and monthly, but yes, struggling to get the data granular enough. And I think this is where the right balance of metrics will benefit. All right, so let's put all these operational frameworks together. This graph gives a snapshot of how much marketing effort and resources are required based on the company's maturity. And this can mean both time and money. And I'm aware that the definition of company stages and valuations widely varies these days, like a Series A is really a seed stage or vice versa. So take it with a grain of salt. This graph is also meant to be super directional. It can go up or down. So for pre-seed stage companies, experimentation should be the main go-to-market function and focus on getting early signals of product market fit. And then for seed stage companies, you're still experimenting, but maybe now you're ready to test some marketing channels that are super organic in nature, so hopefully no paid. And then as the growth motions are spinning into the Series A stage, you're starting to focus on growing your users and creating baselines. And then once you're in the later stages, like Series C or above, it's all about scaling and specializing. So I've loosely introduced the go-to-market motions, and so we can now dive deeper into those earlier questions using the funnel framework. This table shows a bird's eye view of how much a company should be focusing on brand and growth marketing and the type of talent that might be required to execute the go-to-market needs. And we'll look at each phase in more detail. And as I'm going through each company stage, feel free to share examples of companies that you think exemplify marketing in a balanced way for this specific stage. I'd love to see them in the chat. For pre-seed and seed stage companies, there's less debate about the role of marketing, hopefully. Especially for a pre-seed, I wouldn't worry about marketing just yet and hyper-focus on getting early signals of product market fit. With small amount of users, your bottom of funnel metrics should look really, really good, and that's what the company should optimize for. And as you move into the seed stage, you're starting to experiment with marketing, but generally speaking, I don't advise spending money on channels yet. You're simply exploring what messaging and channels are driving people organically to your site or app. This means you're telling your brand story or educating your product through content on social or a blog, or you're testing messaging on your website, or you're setting up lifecycle emails that get triggered once they sign up, and then emails that take them through onboarding. And the best type of person to do this is a marketing athlete who isn't afraid of wearing many different hats as a generalist on the team. You can certainly augment talent with freelancers to fill any gaps, but I think that's the appropriate talent that's needed at this stage. And as the growth motions are spinning into the Series A stage, you're starting to focus on growing users and creating baselines, but the majority of your effort and money are being spent on growth marketing tactics more than brand. It doesn't mean that you're ignoring brand marketing altogether, but relative to your overall time and resources, most of the marketing should focus on acquiring users and laying the infrastructure for the team. From a brand marketing perspective, you're probably storytelling on your key organic channels. So some of the growth marketing efforts may include testing paid media to create CPC and CPA baselines. This is assuming that you have product market fit along with very strong activation and retention rates. And then you may also be testing lifecycle messaging to more channels beyond just email, which will require you to have a more sophisticated CRM system and analytics infrastructure to scale later. This means you may end up adding specialized skills on the team, like a performance or growth marketer who can drive testing for paid media and set up CRM and analytics tools. It's also a good time to have a more experienced marketer coordinating efforts. I generally think it's still too early for a head of marketing, but I do see a lot of Series A startups hiring for that role at this stage. Series B is when a company is getting to a more serious stage. You have more capital to invest in marketing in the top of funnel, which is a really fun stage for a marketer to scale their impact. And as you're scaling, the allocation of your time and resources become a little bit more even across brand and growth marketing. For example, you're driving traffic from several different channels. You might start testing brand media if your mid-funnel metrics are very stable. Or you can scale your performance spend, but it should represent roughly 20% of your channel mix and not the majority of your signups. And you're also scaling automated messages across in-product, email, push, and SMS. And I think this is a stage where a head of marketing role becomes really useful because they will know how to orchestrate talent, manage a diversified portfolio of marketing channels, and also work with their leadership counterparts to drive trade-off discussions. And finally, there's the large company who has not only reached product market fit and scaled to a lot of users, they've made themselves a household name and maybe they're being coined as the latest unicorn company. And this company is likely categorized as Series C or later, and maybe they're even post-IPO. And at this stage, the funnel is stable from top to bottom. You're still growing, but hypergrowth isn't always the goal because you may have already maximized the category and it's time to think bigger. And from a brand perspective, this is an opportunity to shift entire mindsets by revisiting your brand strategy that starts with audience research, which may define a more specific audience that you can expand into. And sometimes that can also mean expanding into an entirely new category. Once you have an incremental target audience defined, then you can also revisit your brand positioning. And once you've revised your positioning, there's an opportunity to run a full funnel marketing campaign, which will require an integrated approach across brand and growth teams. And it's understood that growth is achieved over time. There's no debate about that, either incrementally or by expanding to a completely new audience in an adjacent category, which puts heavier emphasis on storytelling to make an impact. And with that, I'll wrap things up with a few key takeaways. First, we talked about the balancing act. It's important to acknowledge that both brand and growth are important. Each business has unique needs, and it will require curiosity and dialogue to find the right balance. Second, be curious and organized. If you have metrics in place with the right cadence to review them regularly, you'll have the chance to invite your colleagues for a discussion. And together you can design a plan and monitor progress regularly. And then finally, focusing based on your company stage. Your marketing effort and resources will depend on the company's maturity, and teams will need to be honest with themselves on which funnel needs attention and the appropriate go-to-market motion to drive growth and the talent that's needed to get things done. And if you're ever in doubt, here's one of my favorite quotes from Steve Jobs. It's simply, stay hungry and stay foolish. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed the talk. Thank you for listening. And I fundamentally believe that brand and growth marketing teams complement each other beautifully when they can find a good rhythm. And I wish this for your teams too. And if you'd like to reach out, stay in touch, here's my email. And with that, I'll take questions from the audience.